All right, hello and welcome to episode 2 of Generation Who Cares. My name is Jason Riegelsberger, and helping us along the way is Aiden from Half Coast Studios. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show today. We're going to be working on some social media platforms here soon, so hopefully we can interact with you on topics and already discussed ideas, and hopefully get that worked out here really soon. Our guest today has established himself as a musician in many successful previous and current bands. Please welcome Kevin Gagnepain. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Jason, what's up?
Not much. I appreciate you coming by. And just to get started, I noticed that there's a show on August 2nd at Riverport. I
Freshly
still call it Riverport.
announced.
Yes.
Yes,
With
sir.
Blue Oyster Cult. Tell me how you get Blue Oyster Cult to show up to play before you guys.
Well, it doesn't hurt to have a partnership with Live Nation
Okay.
on the summer show.
Yeah.
They're pretty instrumental in some of these acts, but it's an idea that we've Live Nation and the band have discussed for the last few years. We started, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago with Here Come the Mummies, which is this band from Indianapolis that is like crazy good funk band, but they all dress like mummies.
Yeah.
And how does funk fit with Pink Floyd? Well, it doesn't, but our name's El Monstero and their name was Mummies,
Yeah.
so that goes together.
Yeah.
And that was the start of it. And then Living Color agreed to do a show, which was
Great band.
fantastic.
Yeah. Man, they're great.
The next year we had Don Felder, the guy who wrote Hotel California.
Yeah.
Then John Anderson, the singer of Yes, and now Blue Oyster Cult. So
Wow.
pretty cool lineup of people that we admired growing up and that probably, inspired us in some way along the way. And Blue Oyster Cult for me, my Blue Oyster Cult story is when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I was at our school picnic, Catholic St. Louis kid, at our school picnic. And there was some band, there's probably a bunch of guys that were in high school. And, I didn't know who they were. I was 12 or something like that,
Yeah.
11. And they played Burning for You. And I knew the song from Casey and it sounded like the song. And I was like, holy crap, I want to do that.
Yeah. That's great.
They can do it. I can do it. So that was kind of, one of the catalysts for me wanting to be a musician was that experience and that song. So it's kind of close to me. And when Live Nation brought them up as a possibility, we were looking at 3 or 4 different things. I'm like, that's great. There's another connection with John Anderson, who was there last year. Richie Castellano, who's John Anderson's bass player, plays all those Yes songs on bass, which are like impossible if you've ever listened to them. He's a rhythm guitar and keyboard player in Blue Oyster Cult, same guy. So
That's awesome.
so there was a connection there too. I think he was able to say, I had this experience because I'm sure when Buck Dharma gets the memo that, some Pink Floyd cover band wants you to open up for him, they're like, what the hell is this? And we have to get over that hump and explain to them how big the show is and how much support St. Louis gives us. And we're lucky enough with Live Nation's help to get the message to them and for them to accept. So I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. I think what's really telling is trying to convince a group or somebody that a Pink Floyd cover band is playing in front of 20,000 people.
Right.
I mean,
And-
that's just something that you probably don't ever hear of a cover band playing for 20,000 people.
And it's pretty, we're limited to the Midwest, really. We've played in some other cities, mostly in St. Louis. So it's not like it's not the name that's on everybody's tip of their tongue. They might have heard the Australian Pink Floyd or something like that, but they have no idea who we are by our name. And so, that's kind of fun for me.
Yeah, I bet. So you're talking about your early influences. What other influences did you have? And when did you kind of discover that the bass is what I'm playing? And did you try other instruments, but the bass just was what fit?
Yeah. So I started on piano, took piano lessons from 4th grade through probably sophomore year of high school. And I played some percussion in high school band. And I really wanted to be a guitar player. And I took all those lessons on the other instruments, but at home I was learning how to play guitar. One of my parents' friend's son played guitar, and I thought he was a really cool guy, so I wanted to be like that. And so I was playing guitar, and I got to my junior year of high school. I was in the lab band, which is like the B team jazz band. playing guitar. And the director came to me at the end of the year and he's like, "Hey, uh, I just want you to know you're not going to be the guitar player in jazz band next year. But we have somebody for that.
Mhm.
But if you want to take the bass home this summer and learn how to play it, I think you could probably audition and make it as the bass player." And I'm like, "All right, give me the bass." So they gave me the school bass. I took it home for the summer, and he gave me some things to work on, and I just kind of found my way around and just fell in love with it. And the other part of your question, what are my influences? Uh, in the beginning, the Beatles were probably my biggest influence. The Beatles and Kiss. That was like grade school for me. Beatles and Kiss, and then KC 95.
Yeah.
KWK occasionally, and that doesn't exist anymore. I'm
HDR.
dating myself
No
completely.
KHDR or anything? Or K Hits 96?
KHDR later on. Yeah, sure. So Beatles and Kiss, and when I started playing the bass, I realized that Paul McCartney and Gene Simmons are both huge influences on me musically, and I like the way both of them play bass in the projects that they're in. I mean, Paul McCartney's bass playing is still my favorite of anybody, uh, and Gene Simmons is, Gene Simmons. He's the demon. Oh, it's not the light. It spits fire and blood and blows stuff up.
Have you decided to do that in any of your shows?
We blow a lot of stuff up. Have you ever seen El Monstero?
I have. I've been there. So
I mean, it's basically
Fire and-
14-year-old me and spending every dime that we make blowing stuff up.
It is a great show, and I enjoy going. We've been to the show also where you play at the pageant during the Christmas. How did that come about? Because you literally play every day, it seems like, for 3 months. I mean, every time you turn
Not
around.
quite that many.
I know, but you guys are constantly, you're playing and you get the support, which is awesome. How did that come about, just having that little, what we'll call residency, we'll say?
So we did the first El Monstero Pink Floyd show. El Monstero was a cover band that I was a side project of the band Stir that I was in, and it was the three of us, and then we had Mark Quinn, who's the Roger Waters vocals of El Monstero. He fronted the band, and we were like his backing band, and we were called El Monstero y los Masked Avengers, and it was just a silly name. We just wanted to. We were at that point. Stir was on Capitol Records. We were between records, and we just wanted to keep playing. But we didn't want to play in the bars and call ourselves Stir. Our agent didn't want us to do that. Capitol Records didn't want us to do that. So we just came up with that goofy name and did it. We wore Lone Ranger masks and we played on every night. We ended with Pink Floyd, the set back half of Dark Side of the Moon. So we did that for like a year, and that Thanksgiving we decided we're going to do a whole show of Pink Floyd music because that people love that part of what we did. And so we did it at Mississippi Nights that year, 1999, and it went over really well. The pageant opened up the following year, and Pat Hagen, who had booked us at Mississippi Nights, is now booking the pageant. And so we followed him over to the pageant, and it just grew from there. Yeah. And we moved it from Thanksgiving to Christmas because now our record was out. And so we're on the road all year, doing that. But the entire record industry takes a break in December, and they don't come back till like almost the end of January. So nobody's working at any of the record labels. None of the bands are really on tour that aren't self-sufficient. And so we had that time we were going to be home. We wanted to be home anyway. We were gone the whole rest of the year. So we just said, hey, we'll come home. We're going to have a bunch of rehearsals and we'll do this show. And that started it and just stayed there. Turns out it's a great time of year because people come back from school and their families come in town. And so people have seen the show in the past. It's kind of become a tradition for a lot of St. Louis families to come to that show together. And we see generations of people there all the time. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's it is a great show, and I'm glad that you guys continue to do that after all these years. Sometimes things just kind of go away, but this has continued to almost grow, if you will, and becomes
it really has. And like this last year, it was amazing to see how many young people were in the crowd every night. That's what I worry about is we're getting older, is the crowd going to age out, and we're seeing a lot of young kids, and they love that music, and they love real guitars and all this stuff, and it's so cool to have that connection and introduce music to I mean, we're not. They've obviously heard it before; they wouldn't be there. But we really get to give it to them live in a way that they probably weren't expecting. You're not going to see Pink Floyd next week,
Yeah.
so you get us, and then we blow a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
up, and the kids are like, "Holy crap, that was amazing!" and so yeah, it's
Right.
just it's been very organic and very grassroots, and it just keeps growing.
Now, is Hard Promises kind of going in that direction as well? I mean, we've seen that. I've seen that show. It's phenomenal. But is are you looking for that group to kind of do the same thing, or is that just
I
having fun?
I don't really I try not to have expectations on what something can be.
Mhm.
Um, just react to what happens. And with Hard Promises, Hard Promises is a Tom Petty tribute for those of
Yeah.
you listening who don't
Yeah.
know.
Oh yeah. I was gonna
Um,
say that.
and Hard Promises actually probably sounds more like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers than El Monstero sounds like Pink Floyd. But we're really with Tom Petty, it's really about the songs because Tom Petty wrote like 75 songs that you know every word to.
Yeah.
And it's just, you play that show and it's like it's a big sing along and the band is so fun to play with. Like the guys in that band are just
Yeah. It's a
a
great
couple of
show.
them are in El Monstero with me.
Yeah.
And they're just guys that I love to play with. They're guys that I love to hang out with. And I think that comes across in the music when we get together and do it. And we know enough people in the crowd at this point that it's kind of like we're all just getting together to have a party and celebrate the music of whichever artist it happens to be that night.
So how did to backtrack a little bit, back in the 90s, you start with Stir, and you how does that band come together, and basically you start just accelerating into what I'd call probably the mid 90s alternative music scene. So how did that come about, and what was life like kind of going on the road, touring, and
Yeah.
then how did you feel, or when did you say, you know what, we've kind of arrived here? Because not a lot of people play music get to that level. So explain how that felt, and what was it like
Man,
to do that?
there's a
I know
there's a
I
20 questions
I
there,
put
and we can
seven
spend the next seven
commas
and
in
a half
there.
hours
Yeah.
talking about it.
But how about just a brief
Brief
synopsis of
brief
that list?
synopsis.
Yeah.
So I jumped around from college to college. We were before we
Yeah.
sat down to talk about this, we were talking about college, and I was paying my own way. Went to KU my freshman year, ran out of money, came home, lived at home, went to UMSL for a couple of years, knowing that I was going to end up going to Mizzou. I was my at that point, what I thought would be my career was advertising, and I was going to be a creative director or graphic designer or write ads. I mean, I was really willing to do just about anything. But I started playing in bands in college, and when I got to Mizzou, I hooked up with Andy Schmidt and Brad Booker, um, who I met the summer before we were all going to Mizzou. So Brad was at UMSL, I was at UMSL, Andy was at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and we all knew that we were going to be going to Mizzou the next year. And they were high school friends. I got introduced to Brad through a fraternity at UMSL, and so the three of us got together over that summer and played together a little bit. I'm like, it's pretty cool. Heard about this singer, so we started a band up there. It was called The Choice. We released a couple albums as The Choice, and that went to '93. And in '93, we were recording a new album for The Choice, and on the nights off from recording, Andy was going in and recording some other songs, and he was putting vocals on them.
Mhm.
And so this is like we're like 2 or 3 weeks into recording the Choice album, and Andy goes, "Hey man, meet me over at the studio." So I go over there, and he starts playing me these tracks, and I'm like, "Holy shit!" It just sounded like what was on the radio. It sounded like it was happening, like it
Yeah.
just felt right. I'm like, "Well, what do we?" He's like, "I don't know if I want to do the Choice anymore. I want to do this." And so basically the three of us quit the Choice and started Stir. I don't want to say that we fired the other guy because that's not what
Yeah.
happened. We literally all quit the band and
Yeah.
then started a new band. Because Rick was the singer of the Choice, was a great, awesome guy. He was my best friend in the band. It really, I had a struggle with that but I knew that the music that Andy was writing was something that
Next
was
level, something
current. It was,
different.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was the direction that felt right.
Yeah.
And so we did that. 93, we recorded an album, and then we started touring on our own. Andy worked for Contemporary Productions, and I was working at a pet store. I forget what Brad was doing. And we all had these part-time jobs, and we finished school, and we were touring every weekend. We'd go play like the East Coast and come home, play Boomers on Friday,
Early
Saturday,
80s, yeah.
Sunday, then go back out and do Michigan, and we started connecting. We got on this compilation disc called Aware Records. We started connecting with other Aware bands in these other locations. So we'd go there and open up for them. They'd come to St. Louis and open up for us. And we just started this network that took us pretty much from St. Louis up to Chicago through Michigan, and then like from on the East Coast from Vermont all the way down to South Carolina, and we would hit these 4 or 5 day little van tours, and come home and play Boomers to make more money so we could afford to buy gas to go do the next van tour because we weren't making any money out on the road, and uh, and we just started getting a little bit of a following everywhere, and we we played South by Southwest in '98. I don't remember what
Now,
year it
what
was.
bands were there? Your Stir's playing. Who else is playing there?
Uh, that year, I really, the only band that I can remember seeing, because I wanted to go see what they were about, was Los Straight Jackets.
Okay,
So I don't know if you know who that is.
never heard of them.
They're kind of a rockabilly type band. They all wear Mexican wrestling masks. And I just heard about them. I'm like, oh, you got to get over there and see that.
Yeah,
But so I don't know who were the big bands at South by Southwest, but at that time period, like the bands that we were playing with were the Verve Pipe, Matchbox 20, Vertical Horizon, Train. Um, Boy, who else? This band from Oklahoma called Wakeland. Um, there's a bunch of these Aware Network
yeah,
bands. That style of kind of whatever that is. That was what kind of alternative music that was kind of rock and rolly before Papa Roach
hmm
and Corn,
okay,
right? It was
yeah,
before it got super heavy. Uh, Not that Papa Roach and Corn are the heaviest, but you know what I mean. It's definitely heavier than we were. It's
yeah,
definitely heavier than Matchbox 20 or the Goo Goo Dolls, which are kind of where Stir was at that point in time. But that was really one of the things going on the road in Stir in the beginning was agents never knew where to put us. Like, what kind of band are you guys? And we were doing gigs with like Widespread Panic and String Cheese Incident
yeah.
in one market, and then we're opening up for Spider Monkey in another market, which is kind of a ska thing. Uh, and so like nobody knew where we belonged. And it's funny, the first song on our first album is "We Belong."
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I
We didn't.
well, well, I mean, the influence that you have, and then all of a sudden you're playing in these shows, the competition, if you will. I mean, did you feel like there was competition playing with some of these bands, trying to, trying to get
It,
above
I
everybody
don't think
else?
it was that. It didn't feel like competition. Maybe. I think that in St. Louis there was a little bit of competition, like in my head, like how do we get the most people at our shows? How
Yeah,
do we get more people to show up? What's this band doing that's different? But really that's it. It's more like learning from other bands. Watch what they do. What do they do that is right? What do they do? What's working? How can we apply that to what we're doing? And it was more like that. And I'm not talking about the creative side of the music or anything. I'm just thinking like, how did they flyer? Did they hire a street team? How did do they buy advertising anywhere? That kind of stuff.
yeah,
My mind was always kind of working on the business end of the band.
okay,
Uh, when it came to getting a record deal, like what's a good record deal look like? I'm reading, we're touring around in a van, and I'm in the back of the van reading books on how to sign a good record deal.
right, right. We went to my friend and I went to the local late show a couple years ago, and they were playing right next to. They were playing at what's the place next to the pageant? I keep forgetting.
Delmar Hall.
Delmore Hall, and Local H opened up for the Toadies.
Okay.
After they were done,
It's a fun 90s lineup.
yeah, it was great. After they were done, they went to the back and they were selling their own T-shirts and stickers.
Yeah.
It's the two guys just standing there doing it. I mean, they didn't have, there wasn't somebody working for them or doing anything. And, is was that something that you wanted to look into, is not to hire somebody, but actually be more
Well,
interactive with the fans and do that
back
type
in
of
the
thing?
day, that we did that all the time when we were on the road. We didn't have a crew, it was us,
Yeah.
and maybe a sound guy if we were lucky enough to splurge on spending money for somebody else to ride with us.
Right.
So we were selling T-shirts and CDs after the show from the side of the stage or whatever. In those guys' cases, I mean, both those bands they're not one-hit wonders, but they really both have one big hit. And touring around now, it's a way to make money.
Mhm.
It's another way to generate cash, and the less people you pay, the more you get to keep.
Yeah.
Um, and I think for for us, even playing in for Stir, playing in St. Louis, and seeing people that I might see every weekend in a bar band, but seeing them in that from that perspective of playing in this band where we wrote the music and we did this stuff, whatever that was in the 90s and early 2000s. It's just a cool way to connect and talk to people. I mean, I always, no matter what show, no matter what band, I try to make myself available as soon as we're done playing to at least have a few conversations.
Yeah. When you were talking about St. Louis and the music scene, how do you feel about the St. Louis original music scene today? I feel as if it's kind of not as robust as it was maybe 10 or
I
15 years
think we're
ago.
too old to know.
Oh,
I think
that's
you and
terrible
I are
that you
too
just said
old
that.
to know. Uh,
I was hoping you didn't say that.
yeah, I it's funny because I meet a lot of younger musicians who come to El Monstero or whatever, or they may hit me up on social media and ask me like advice about something. Hey, how did you guys do this? What do you think we should do about this? And and Jimmy Griffin and I have talked to a couple of these young guys, and he's the best at it. But it really, it's like you have all the time in the world to be in a cover band after you're 40.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
go make a difference. Go write songs. I mean, that's kind of the what's special about all the bands that I play in is almost all of the guys were out there in the 90s and early 2000s touring, releasing records, couple different labels, different bands, and so we had that part of our life, and then we decided that we wanted to sleep in our own bed every night,
Sure.
and so we kind of changed what we were doing to keep playing because it's important to us, and but I think we have that history, and we know where that came from, and that uh, helps us deliver in a different way than a regular bar band might.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything against a regular bar band. I love
No.
bar bands.
Yeah. Sometimes those are
Um,
the best shows, actually.
yeah, yeah,
You know?
totally. Uh, but yeah, I'm sure there is an original music scene in St. Louis. I follow a couple people on social media that are writing songs, and I'm like, I don't know where they play. I don't know how to see them, but they put out videos all the time of them,
Yeah.
and I'm like, man, these kids are writing great songs,
Yeah.
and we all still have original projects on the side, but when we play our original projects, it's typically to an audience that is built from all of the other things that we do.
Mhm.
And so it's not like we're not in that scene. And I don't know where that scene is, but I'm sure there's one somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I just remember when we were playing, we would go to Vintage Vinyl along Delmar, and we would put our flyer,
Yeah.
right there. And that's how you got everybody to come to your show. And I took my kids or my oldest daughter to Vintage Vinyl probably about 6, 7 years ago. There were hardly any flyers up anymore. And I kind of thought, is now with social media, obviously it's probably different. Everything goes on Facebook or Instagram. You don't have to put everything on there. So it amazes me a little bit that I don't know much more about the scene,
Yeah.
and maybe you're right. I'm probably just an old guy, but
I
it's
think
kind of strange.
and I think there's like a little gap from let's say 2006, 2007 to 2018, where electronic music became like the thing and DJs became the thing.
Yeah.
And they're still huge. I mean, they're not going away. and there's a place for that. But I think that kind of took the place of kids learning how to play an instrument or caring about who Nirvana was. Like that didn't matter as much to them. They wanted to know who the guy was in the giant marshmallow costume.
Yeah.
And and so it was different for a few years. I think it's coming back. I mean, if what I see on YouTube or social media, I mean, these kids are way better than I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have all these tools now to learn things at will,
Yeah.
and nobody's sitting there with a record trying to slow it down so you can hear how to play the part.
Now you are dating yourself if you're
I
talking
know.
about that. All right. I just want to let you know.
I had cassettes too.
Mixtapes. How many mixtapes did you have?
Yeah. Oh man, I was the king of mixtapes. The best. I couldn't afford records. I went to the library and would check them out and then
yeah.
tape them onto the cassette player.
Yeah. Or how about burning the CDs? Now cars don't even come with CD players, so you can't even play a CD anymore.
Right. I have
it's
cases of CDs. I mean, I don't know what to do with them.
When you were with the band Stir and you're going around touring, what was the atmosphere like with the record companies? Because so many times you hear that record companies are doing good when you're starting, and then all of a sudden they fall favor with you, and then all of a sudden you just
Man, we were so lucky, really. I mean, the time that from record company to publishing company, attorney, agent, I mean, we just had management. We just had a group of people that really believed in us, and Capitol really believed in us. Gary Gersh, when he signed us, he's like, "This is this is a 3 record band. We're not expecting you to do anything till the third record." And time marches on, and those labels have turnover in employment, and pretty soon you got a bunch of people that you never met. Our A&R person actually stayed with us through Capitol the whole way, though. And then so we had a ton of great support. We were a baby band. We did have markets where we'd show up, and you couldn't find our album at the record store, but they're having us do some promotional thing. It's like, well, what do we do? Why are we here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a little bit of that, but I think that was just miscommunications along the way. The label we really had them behind us. We had an incredible team of people. I mean, if you saw the resume of the producers that produced our albums and the A&R guy that signed us and that, Gary Gersh and the people at Capitol Records who they were all involved in. It's an unbelievable. We had a dream team. It just
Great.
didn't happen fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And Napster came along and pulled the carpet out from underneath all the bands that were at our level. If you hadn't sold 100,000 records, or actually probably closer to gold at that, which was 500,000 back then, you got yanked, and you had to find, and we weren't exactly sure what to do. So we were older to begin with. We were older when we got signed. At the time that we got we got dropped in 2003. And so I was, I don't want to really date myself like that, but I was old enough. And I had, and at that point, my son was born. He was, he was 6 at that point. So, it was just it was a time, I kind of just knew it's time to look for the next thing.
Yeah.
I don't think we had enough fight left in us to try to find a new label and start over and then compete with Napster. And music had gotten so heavy, at least in the rock and roll world, compared to what we were doing or what we were good at doing. And we tried to write a little bit like that. It just was disingenuous, and we stopped. I mean, it was silly.
What kind of lessons have you learned from just the whole experience of not only playing music but the business side and things like that? Have you taken back or taken anything away from your experiences and been like, man, I could have done something different, or I could have gone this way instead of that way?
Yeah. Well, let's say from 2003 to 2009, I wasn't the happiest guy in the world. And yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking, why didn't it happen? And then there's 100 people standing next to me going, well, it did happen. You were on a label and you toured, you did all this stuff, and
Yeah.
but to me, it was a failure. And so I struggled with it for a long time. And then, you know, started playing in the cover bands and I was having fun doing that, but I still struggled with the fact that, you spend, even though I went to school for something else, by the time I really got serious about the band and knew that we were onto something, I was laser focused on that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do everything I can to make this work. And there's just things that are totally out of my control, and I had a really hard time accepting that.
Mhm.
Um, but you come around, and the things that people used to tell me back then, like, oh, but you got all the stories from, and none of that stuff mattered to me, but it matters now. Like now, I go back. You know what? They're right the whole
Yeah.
time. I was
Yeah.
just too busy sitting there feeling sorry for myself and
Right.
being angry and really being drunk for 6 straight years
Mhm.
that I couldn't see the light outside of the tunnel I put myself in.
Yeah, not everybody can say they were signed with Capitol Records.
It's true.
When you think about it, there's a very small amount of people that can do what you've done, and I think that's a great thing that you have recognized that because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty
I'm
cool.
able to really look back and,
Yeah,
being sober helps, but,
yeah,
able to look back and appreciate, all that stuff and really, I don't want to answer the question on what went wrong.
hmm
I have some thoughts, but,
yeah,
I mean, that's between me and the guys in the band, that's
sure,
not for anybody.
yeah,
There's some things that we might have done a little differently, but I don't know that they would have changed the outcome. I wasn't gonna stop Napster from happening, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. That was
I
out of
couldn't
control.
convince the
Yeah,
record labels to embrace the technology instead of try to fight it,
yeah,
which is really what somebody needed to do at that point in time. But it was so new, and everybody just like the entire record industry just panicked. What are we going to? We got to stop this technology. You can't stop
no,
technology.
no,
It's
it keeps
always
growing.
gonna,
Yeah,
once somebody creates fire, they're going to burn
hmm
stuff. There's just no, you can't stop them from doing it.
How did you feel when Metallica kind of stepped in and said, that this has got to stop?
When,
Because didn't I thought Metallica or Lars
yeah,
came out and he was like, "You know what? This has to stop. You're taking our money."
at the time, I cracked the same jokes that a lot of people were cracking. Is that like, look at these rich guys complaining about Napster not making any money. That was me, angry me, looking at it at an angry time in my life. And when I look back at it now, I'm like, no, they were standing up for me
Right,
and
right.
all the other hundreds or not thousands of bands that were at that level that were, you know, growing in the label farm teams
Yeah,
and trying to go, to get to the next level. And they just knew that this was going to kill that.
yeah,
And they were right. I mean, if you look at it's now become streaming and all that stuff, and there's all these battles about how do you get paid for that. And, hey, my song got played 10 million times and I made $637.
yeah,
What do you
yeah,
do? You know what you do? You go on tour and you sell your own t-shirts.
yeah,
Ask
yeah,
local H.
yeah, yeah. Pretty much. Out of all the shows that you've played, what's your favorite? If you have one, and we'll just say maybe where you with Stir, or even El Monstero, what has been the show where you've just said, "Man, this is the best one"?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say that there,
There's
there's
probably a
there's
bunch.
moments in
Yeah.
a lot of shows, right? I mean, I can give you a couple standout things. We did a show at some little music festival in Illinois, and Nickelback had to play before us because they were brand new.
That's
And they
great.
were pissed because their song was much bigger than ours in most markets.
Yeah.
But Illinois, Stir was pretty big at that point in time in the area. It was somewhere local. I don't remember exactly where it was. And they played. They got off, and they were kind of dicks. And then we played this song Ladybug, and this giant mud fight, like what happened later at Woodstock,
Yeah.
happens, and and there's just like we walk off stage and we're covered in mud. We look like 9 Inch Nails at Woodstock. The key, everything on stage is covered in mud. All our gear is covered in mud, and the crowd just went crazy. And I just remember walking by Chad Kroger, and I just gave him this look like, "That's why." You know, it felt good at the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Another one was we played Atlanta. What's it called? It's a festival in downtown Atlanta, out in the street, and we were doing some tour dates with Creed and Seven Dust at the time, and so we were on this bill. Like the one of the tour stops was this music festival, and so we were in the lineup because we were on tour with them. We were in the lineup with them on that day,
Yeah.
and we started playing, and it was a mud fight, but a water bottle fight. Like it wasn't a fight. I'm just people just started throwing water bottles. Like it started in one little section of the crowd, and it just erupted till there was just like 3 city blocks full of people, and everybody is throwing these plastic water bottles up in the air. It looked so
Oh, I
amazing.
bet. Yeah.
My cousin was at the show, and he actually worked for a company that bottled water, and like it was back before you could just take a cell phone video. So he's like, "Man, I wish I had a video camera. This would have been the greatest thing ever." But that was a really I just love when you kind of lose control,
Yeah.
right? It's on the verge of chaos, but the band and the audience are all feeling it, and it's all one ball of energy, and it could go totally south in the
Yeah.
next second, or it could just be the most amazing feeling in the world. And in most of those cases, it turns out to be amazing. We've had a few things where things have gone a little bit south. Luckily, nothing crazy that
Yeah.
there's no news stories about us, but yeah, so those are two great examples.
Yeah. I've always wondered though, which is crazy as a drummer, when you mess up. Nobody else does, but you do. And so, have you had that time where you're playing and you messed up, but it still sounded great, and you're kind of like out
Yeah,
of sorts a little bit?
unfortunately, I play bass, and so when the bass player messes
Yeah.
up, everybody knows because
Yeah.
because you just completely changed
Yeah.
the chord of the music. And if you really messed up, you're out in left field somewhere,
Yeah.
and nothing sounds right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that happens all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't go a show without, it's very rare that I go a show without a clam or two.
Yeah.
And I just hope, you're right though. If the clam falls in the right place, no one knows,
No one knows.
right? In fact, if it sounds kind of good, I'll do it again the
Yeah.
next time that part of the song comes along, just to let everybody know that I
It
totally
was
meant to
okay.
do that. Uh,
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times
yeah,
before where, it's supposed to go in this beat, and then all of a sudden I'm way off. I'm
yeah,
like,
and then
"Well, wait a minute."
you get in your head,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh man, or you panic, and you're like, how does that? You start thinking about how the part goes, and then you're messing up. Yeah, I mean, all that's part of live music, right? I mean, it's in the moment. So it's one of the great things about it, and it's also one of the scary things about it, that anything can happen in the next second.
Yeah. When you look at when you're playing at Riverport, I keep calling it Riverport. I
I
don't even
still
know
call
what
it
it's called there.
Riverport.
Okay.
It's fine.
When you look
Hollywood
at
Casino
There you
Amphitheater
go.
for
Thank
those of
you.
you listening.
All right. When you look at the crowd and you see 20,000 people there, do you not get nervous? Is there any nerve factor in there? Because you probably, just like myself, I've played in front of 7 people,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're playing in front of 20,000. How do you not get nervous?
I don't know the answer to that necessarily, but there are things about playing in front of a crowd that big that are way easier than playing in front of 7 people.
Really?
When you're playing in front of 7 people, you can see all 7 of them, and you know they can see you, and you know they're looking at you because you can see all their faces. And when you're playing in front of a giant crowd, it's kind of a blur in a way. And I mean, you still connect with people that they're close enough that you can see their face and everything, and that's surprisingly far back. But it's also this giant field of energy that's coming at you. Uh, it just sucks performance out of you. I don't know how else to put it. It's
Yeah.
so I nerves usually happen backstage. I get more nervous in rehearsal most of the time than I
Really?
do at the gig because I know everybody in the band knows when I mess it up,
Yeah.
right?
To our
I
last
don't want to
point,
be the
yeah,
guy. I
yeah.
never want to be the guy. I just want to. I'm the bass player. I just want to I want to be there for everything,
Yeah.
but nobody noticed me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way of looking at it. So what shows do you have coming up that you
Uh,
can let us know about so that we can
right.
kind of come
So,
out and take a
I
look?
mean, there's the bar band. I play in Joe Dirt and the Dirty Boys, and I
Awesome.
play in the John Hughes Experience, which are two bar bands that are out pretty much playing every weekend
Yes.
somewhere in the St. Louis,
Yes,
St.
they
Charles
are.
area. Um, so I'm in those bands all the time. Hard Promises is coming up in April, I think, again.
Okay.
And we just talked about El Monstero is August 2nd,
Hmm.
just announced. And Hard Promises is on sale now as well. So that you buy tickets for Hard Promises. I think you buy tickets for both at Ticketmaster, but Hard Promises is at the pageant and El Monstero is at the Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Um, and then Stir is a question mark right now. We're going to get together and talk about trying to get a show in this year.
That's great.
Calendar's super full. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it happen, but we're going to try. And then I have another original project that I started in the mid 2000s called Shooting with Annie, which is like an alt country kind of band. And we haven't played in a couple years, but we started getting back together
Awesome.
and we're writing again and we're going to hopefully get in the studio and play some gigs before the end of 2025. So
That's awesome. What how much time do you need to rehearse for a show?
10 rehearsals.
10 rehearsals.
That's my answer.
Okay.
Uh, that's El Monstero.
Yeah.
Hard Promises is probably 8.
Yeah.
And I don't really rehearse for any of the other stuff unless we're learning new material. And I say 10 because we all play in other things all year and we want to sound like a band. So it takes playing together a few times to remember, oh, that's right. That's where, so and so, that's where he feels the beat. That's where this guy feels the beat.
Yeah.
Oh, I know he's going to rush that part. So, like, you want to sound like a cohesive unit, and those are things that when you play and you're playing your own music in a band, you just take all that stuff for granted because you're just developing as it's happening. But when you're trying to sound like a record, you have to really like zero in on the nuance and make sure. There's sometimes 14 people on stage in El Monstero, and you're trying to all make sure everybody's playing together as a cohesive unit, not just doing their own thing, and also trying to sound like the record. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. Kevin, it's been a pleasure. I
yeah, this
appreciate
has
you
been
coming
great. It
out.
went by super fast.
Yes, it did.
Thanks
And
for having me.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing some insight into, again, somebody that gets to do something that a lot of us don't.
Yeah,
So it's
well,
a pretty cool thing. So I appreciate it.
thanks.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time on Generation Who Cares.